Join me in the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 3 is where we're going to be today. And we're going to pick up reading at verse 13, and we're going to read down to verse number 18. The New American Standard Bible says, "Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and anger, gave orders to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then these men were brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar began speaking and said to them, 'Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods nor worship the golden statue that I've set up? Now, if you're ready, at the moment you hear the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, and bagpipe, all kinds of musical instruments, to fall down and worship the statue that I've made. Very well. But if you do not worship, you will immediately be thrown into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. And what God is there who can rescue you from my hands?' Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, 'Nebuchadnezzar, we are not in need of an answer to give you concerning this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is what, church? He's what, church? Our God whom we serve is able to rescue us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, let it be known, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods nor worship the golden statue that you have set up.' Our God is able, but even if he don't do it, the answer is still no. I want to talk today with this simple thought in mind: trusting God through the fire. You may be seated in the presence of our God. Trusting God through the fire. We learn an important lesson from toddlers that really should give us insight into life. And that is, we all desire to control outcomes. If you think about a toddler who wants to get their way, they have a desired outcome in mind, whether it's a snack they're going to eat, or a game they're going to play, or a toy that you're going to buy that you already told them no to. That toddler has made up in their mind how, as a person of less power, as a person of less resources, and a person of less strength compared to the parent, that they're going to manipulate the outcome of the event to force someone with more power, more resources, and more strength to do for them what they cannot do for themselves. And so you know how it starts. They come to you and they ask, "Mama, daddy, auntie, uncle, mama, whatever your name is, can I have this?" And you say politely, "No, you cannot have this snack at 9 o'clock in the morning. You haven't eaten your breakfast." Or, "No, you cannot have this toy because you did not behave well today in school." It's so like clockwork that Black parents walking in the store, before we get in this store, I'm telling you now, the answer is no. I ain't even asked for no. I'm telling you now, don't ask. And lo and behold, you get in the store and they forget what you told them not to ask for. It starts with an ask, but then if the child is really on one today, it may end up with a tantrum. And what a tantrum is an immature person's ability or desire to manipulate someone with greater resources and power and strength to do something for them that brings them the outcome that they desire. And we all know this from maturity, that maturity is, I can still be okay if things don't go my way. And so we look at toddlers and we love them, and I'm going to warn us not to judge them, because the truth is, in the way many of us relate to God, we are 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 60-year-old, 70-year-old, 80-year-old, 90-year-old toddlers who try to manipulate a being with greater resources and power and strength to give us the outcome we desire. And if we don't get that outcome, we withhold our gratitude. We withhold our praise. We withhold our worship. We withhold our obedience. I'm trying to talk to the toddlers in the room who try to make God do what we want God to do. It's innate. It's in us, which is why it has to be matured out of us or cleansed out of us. We should notice from the way seasons change, shouldn't we? That we really aren't in control of anything. Think about it. When you're going from winter to spring or spring to summer, or soon, Lord willing, summer to fall, you realize we can't make the seasons change. We can ask the Lord, please, Lord, let it rain today because it's hot outside. We can prepare our wardrobe for what's going to happen inevitably in the climate. But all we can really do is get ready for the inevitable and then wait for it to happen to us or for us, and realize it's not something that we can force or cause a change. The same is true in our lives, that we cannot truly control outcomes. I want to talk to the person today who is looking at me with a third eye like, Rev, you must not know about me. I do what I want to do, when I want to do. And the people around me do what I want them to do too. And if they don't, they get in the smoke. I want to talk to you, okay? I also want to talk to the person who is in a fiery situation that you have no clue how you're going to get out of. And you're really struggling to trust God, especially if he don't get you out the way you want him to get you out. You see, that's the thing about trust. Trust is I have to resign to allow God to do what he will do and to accept what he won't do. It's not easy. It's not even easy to preach about. It's definitely not easy to practice. But trusting God is necessary if we're going to have healthy lives. That's why my friend Paul started this month talking to us about trusting God with a story of fishermen who needed to trust Jesus to launch out again. And if we're seeking expansion in our life, it's going to require trust. Then our dear sister Shonda Holmes came and talked to us about trusting God through the lens of Rahab, this powerful woman of faith who chose to risk herself in order to save her family. And then last week, Adrian Robinson stepped in and talked to us about trust from the standpoint of expecting God to show up in situations where there's direct opposition on a mountainous challenge. That's the same thing we find in Daniel chapter 3. It's the same teaching, different story. And the essential truth is trusting God is necessary for life with God. So this is a crazy story. It opens up in the first 7 verses. It's a king. His name is Nebuchadnezzar. We just gonna call him Neb. Neb decides he's gonna build a 90-foot tall golden statue. So that's getting in the elevator and press the 9th floor. And you go from the bottom of the statue to the top, 9 stories high. Then he says he's going to invite the people out to come dedicate this. And then when they come to dedicate it, he changes his mind and says, look, I brought a live band. And when this live band starts playing, we're not just going to dedicate this 90-foot statue. We're going to worship this 90-foot statue. And if you don't bow down and worship, I'm going to put you in the fiery furnace. So verse 8 to verse number 12, the story continues that some of the people who were natives to that country noticed that the Jews weren't worshiping. So they bring the Jews to Neb and say, Neb, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not worshiping. Here's my question. If the music plays and everybody's supposed to be worshiping with their face to the ground, how they see them not worshiping? Church is full of folk like that, ain't it? If you was praying, how you know I wasn't praying? So they bring these guys to the king and they say, King, they didn't worship. The king says, is it true that y'all didn't worship? All right, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna give you another chance. When I cue the live band and the live band plays, just look, we can fix this real easy. Go on and bow down and worship my idol. And they look at the king and they say, look, king, you can do what you wanna do. I don't even know why we having this conversation. It really ain't even nothing to talk about. Because here's what I know, you got some gods, but we serve God. And our God can deliver us from you, but even if he don't, we're still not worshiping your idol. And here's what we learned, this is central truth. God was worthy of their complete trust because of God's ability, not because of a guaranteed outcome. Let me run that back. God was worthy of their complete trust only because of his ability and not because of a guaranteed outcome, which means this. If you are withholding your trust in God until God gives you what you want, how you want, when you want, that's not trust, that's manipulation. And like a toddler shouldn't be able to manipulate us, but they do. We cannot manipulate a sovereign God. If it's nothing else you hear me say, I want to lay this on your lap and I want you to think about it all week, okay? Especially if you find yourself in a fiery situation. When our future is unclear, our trust must be unshakable. If there's nothing else you hear me say today, when our future is unclear, our trust must be unshakable. Let's say it together. When our future is unclear, our trust must be. Sometimes you got to say it till you believe it. There are two things I want to share from this text about an unclear future, but an unshakable faith or trust. Here's the first thing. The godly move different. As godly people, we move different, especially when we're in a fiery trial. When pressure is put on us and temptation is brought to us and things get difficult, the godly move different. And from this story, we see some of the ways that the godly move different. Here's the first way we see. When they are unrighteous in their wants, we must be unshakable in our worship. Ooh, it's gonna get good. When they are unrighteous in their wants, we must be unshakable in our worship. What you mean, Rev? Okay. Neb says, come to the dedication of a statue. They say, cool. When they get there, Neb says, I got a live band. They're like, okay, this is it. Then he says, all right, really, we're going to worship the statue. And they're like, Then he says, and if you don't worship the statue, you're going in the fire. Hold up. How did an invitation to a dedication for a statue turn into a threat on my life? Think about it. If you're outside of an arena of one of your favorite teams, there are statues of some of the greatest players who played for that franchise. Or if you go to our nation's capital, you'll see monuments of some of the greatest civil and political leaders in our history. Imagine getting the auspicious invitation from a king to come to the dedication of a monument, and you get there and find out that your life is being threatened. Whenever someone has an unrighteous want from you, you know the want is unrighteous because what they ask gets worse and worse, more degrading and more degrading. It starts with what feels like an innocent ask, but by the time you get to what they really want something from you that you didn't bargain to give up. So the question is, what do I do if I live with somebody or work for somebody who wants something from me and that want is unrighteous? They're asking me to do something that if I obey them, I disobey God. It's in those moments, church, that we got to be unshakable in our worship. Now, what we see here is a real critique on authentic worship. We got counterfeit worship versus authentic worship. Notice what happens. He says, y'all come to the statue. When you hear the music, just go on and bow down and worship this statue. They say, we're not doing that. And even if God don't get us out, we still not doing it. Here's the question. Who was really worshiping? The ones who responded to music or the ones who made a choice that could cost them their lives? Whew. I want you to hear me. Counterfeit worship is always fearful and manipulative. Authentic worship, I love y'all, Dre, Tim, appreciate y'all. Authentic worship has nothing to do with music and everything to do with life choices. If you know what to do when the music come on, but you don't know how to live without no music, that's counterfeit worship. If you need somebody with a microphone to use fear and manipulation to make you worship, that's counterfeit worship. If you need somebody to threaten you that if you don't give, God ain't gonna pay your bills, that's counterfeit worship. If you need somebody to prophesy to you until you get in your feelings and you have this esoteric experience that make you think you caught up in the third heaven, but when you land on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you mean and nasty to folks and you don't have the spiritual capacity and character to make the right decisions, that's not authentic worship. Is there anybody who can testify? That's why I love coming to the way, because at the way, that ain't how we roll. Is anybody grateful for the fact that my worship has nothing to do with music? It got everything to do with my choices. We're going to sing to you, we're going to preach to you, but we won't manipulate. And I know there's some people in here with church hurt because you've been manipulated. Fear tactics have been used. The music to make the environment get you emotional has been used to make you think that you touched God, but what they asked you for was more and more degrading. Neb says, when you hear the music, worship or I'm going to kill you. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when worship happened, says to him, no, we won't do it. And what they show us is this. Worship happens when trust meets surrender. All right, look at verse 28. It's amazing. It's right there in the text. Daniel 3:28. It says, his servants who put their trust in him, violating the king's command and surrendered their bodies rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. What's happening here? This is Nebuchadnezzar later on in the story saying, I realized when y'all was disobeying me, you was really worshiping God. You trusted God so much that you surrendered. Everybody say surrender. You surrendered yourself that no matter what happened, you weren't going to flinch in your faithfulness to the Lord. Notice what they did. Their obedience to God meant they had to disobey the king. Here's what I'm saying. Never let human authority make you do something to please them that displeases God. I don't care who the human authority is. Because it ain't a human with some authority that they didn't get from God and that they ain't got to answer to God for. Never let a human authority figure make you disobey God in order to obey them. If they ever make you choose, they should make your choice easy. The answer to you is no, because the answer to God is yes. When they're unrighteous in their wants, we must be unshakable in our worship. When they're unsure about their gods, we must be unshakable about our God. Okay, so we know they're unsure about their gods because they got more than one. They hedging. They're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to serve this God, but in case this God don't work out, we got some backup gods. If you look at the meaning of the names in the text, it's all attached to different gods. And if those gods weren't enough, Nebuchadnezzar says, well, you know what? I'm also build a statue just as another God. So they got all these gods they're unsure about. And Nebuchadnezzar, in his pride, says to them, now, if you don't worship, tell me a God that can deliver you from my hand. His problem was when he said God, he spelled it lowercase G-O-D. They responded in the next verse, oh, we can't tell you a lowercase G-O-D who can save us from your hands, but we can tell you an uppercase G-O-D who can save us from your hands. In other words, you got all these gods, And you done conquered all these nations, and you got all this pride and ego, and we don't care about it because we serve the one true God who can deliver us from your hands regardless of what's in your hands. He says, who is the God? Who is the one that can deliver you from me? Thinking that because he got all these false gods, he's the one who's really in control. I'm going to tell you, when people ask you God questions, don't get uncomfortable because you have the God answer. Whew. When they ask you lowercase G-O-D questions, you give them uppercase G-O-D answers. When they try to loop it all in to make you seem like it's all the same and it's all similar, you say, no, not necessarily. There is one true God, and we got to be unshakable in our trust in that one true God. When their wants are unrighteous, we got to be unshakable in our worship. When they're unsure about our gods, we got to be unshakable about our God. But here's the next thing. When they utter threats, we must be unshakable in our trust. See, we move different. We move different. When you threaten me, that only make me trust God more. Okay, have you ever been threatened before? Okay. I've had a couple jobs that led up into this one. I've had this job for 6 months, but I didn't just start working. All right. Blockbuster and Domino's. And I worked for a copy company called DocuPro, and I worked at a law firm. I'm not going to tell you the name of it in case our firm beat your firm and you lost some money, okay? I worked for a law firm. Then I worked for the church. And in all these jobs, it's amazing how you come across different managers who got different attitudes. And managers start thinking just because they got a little nameplate on their shirt or a little title on their door, that they really in control of your life. You ever been threatened by somebody? I can remember one time one of my managers was threatening, and it wasn't a direct threat to me, but the direct threat was to all of us. And the manager was just threatening to take our jobs. And yeah, we're going to cut jobs if y'all don't start working hard. And I'm sitting there like, I need this money. I got kids. So I'm starting to flinch in my faith. And I promise you, as sure as you can hear my voice today, and I don't oftentimes claim this, I felt like the Lord whispered in my ear, do not listen. They are lying. Won't nothing happen to you. And I'm sitting here like, you sure? Because come the first of the month, are you sure? And here I stand today, as honest as I can be, that whenever somebody is threatening you, that's the moment as a child of God, you ought to move different. When your job is threatened, when your security is threatened, when your family is threatened, when your life is threatened, you got to understand that the power of the threat is in the fear it creates. So if you allow a threat to make you afraid, then fear will make you act in a way that faith never would. So God is saying whenever you are threatened, you got to be unshakable in your trust. And I've come to talk to somebody who's been threatened recently. You thought your boss had your future in their hands. No, they don't have your future in their hands. They have their future in their hands. And how they handle you will determine what happens in their future. Is there anybody who can testify, I'm so glad I serve a God who is above anybody who is above me, so I don't have to be fearful from any threats. Defying human threats honors God when my fear of God supersedes my fear of people. Whew. See, a threat really tests your trust. Who you really trust. When someone threatens to harm you, if you respond in fear, it's because you trust that they can make good on the threat. But when you take that threat and you bring it to God and you say, God, okay now. If you don't handle it, I will. Okay. All right. Okay. Lord, I'm trying to keep my hands clean. But you know where I'm from. I murder somebody. And then ask Pastor to pray for him. Look, the godly move different, number one. Number two, and I'll be done. The godly move different. Number two, God moves to deliver. Whenever you're in a fiery trial or a pressure-packed situation, you got to move different. Be unshakable in your worship. Be unshakable in your trust. Be unshakable about your God. Don't respond how they think you're going to respond. Don't react out of emotion, act out of intentionality. You got to move different. And when you move different, here's what you'll find. God will move to deliver you. Okay, so we see God's deliverance in this text on a multitude of levels. Here's the first thing. God delivers in this way. When things get hot, God keeps us cool. When things get hot, God keeps us cool. You don't believe me? Look at verse number 19. Neb is filled with wrath. He's so mad that his face changes towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So he gives the orders to heat the furnace up 7 times more than it was already heated. Can't you see, Neb? All this ego, all these false gods, all this pride, thinking that he just got tried in front of his whole court, so he gonna prove a point. The fire already hot. I mean, what's hotter than fire? But Neb is so offended in his ego that he says, you know what? Make it 7 times hotter. I don't know how they did that. Here's what I do know. The true fire in that room was not in the furnace. It was in the heart of an egotistical maniac. I want you to hear me. If you in this room and you got leadership or influence over anybody's life, whenever we as leaders make demands and rage, the fire of our arrogance can harm those under our authority. Because he says, make it 7 times hotter. He mad, real mad. Oh, you big man, huh? And the men he tells to throw them in, when they get Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they try to throw them in the fire, but the fire burns up the men who obey Nebuchadnezzar. Woo. Verse 27 says, the fire then, when they came out, had no effect on the bodies of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The hair on their head was not singed, their trousers were not damaged, and they didn't even smell like fire had touched them. How not, Rev? Because when things get hot, God'll keep us cool. Is there anybody who's ever had to stay cool in a hot situation where you disoriented the enemy because they couldn't figure out why their gossiping and their lies and their threats and their attacks wasn't getting under your skin, and all you could do was look at them and laugh and pity them and pray, and they couldn't reconcile how they made the room hot, but you stayed cool the whole time. That's because when situations get hot, God'll keep me cool. Is there anybody who's grateful for the fact that he can take the hot out of the fire, give you your own personal air condition, so you walking around in a furnace without breaking a sweat? You ought to give God praise for the fact that he'll keep you cool in a hot situation. Hold up. Everybody take a deep breath. You smell that? That's cocoa butter. Do it again. Take another deep breath. You smell that? That's Vaseline. One more time. I hope that's toothpaste. In this black church with all these black bodies, I smell a lot of things. I smell some cocoa butter. I smell some Vaseline. I smell some lotion. I smell some aftershave. I smell some perfume. I smell some cologne. I smell a little swagger. I smell some confidence. But there's one thing I don't smell. I don't smell smoke. Is there anybody who can testify? Reverend, you can't tell by sniffing me what I've been through. Anybody ever come through a fiery situation with no smoke in your clothes? You ought to open your mouth and give God praise for the fact that you don't look like what you've been. I'm almost done. When things get hot, God keeps us cool. When things get tight, God sets us free. Verse 21 says that these men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were tied up. And the story is very clear. Notice what it says. Tied up in their trousers, with their coats, with their caps, and all their other clothes, and they were thrown into the middle of the fire. Why is the Bible giving us all these details? Because the text wants us to know that they were wrapped in flammable material. Just to make sure they burnt up good and quick, they were bound in their clothes and thrown in the fire. You ever been bound before? I don't know how he does it, but I do know this. Jesus knows how to free the bound. All right, Luke 13, verse number 16, it says, and this woman, a daughter of Abraham, as she is, whom Satan has bound for 18 years, this woman had a hump in her back. The Bible says she was double bent over for 18 years. Jesus says, woman, thou art loosed. He freed her when she was bound. Okay, maybe you remember the story of Lazarus, this man who was dead for 4 days. In John chapter 11, verse number 44, he says, Lazarus, come forth. Lazarus comes scooting or floating out of the tomb. Jesus looks at Lazarus, and the text says that he was bound hand and foot with wrappings, and his face was wrapped around with a cloth. Jesus said, unbind him and let him go. What you mean, Reverend? When the devil is on you to try to bind you, or when people wrap you to try to bury you, don't ever trip, because God knows how to loose you and set you free. And I heard the writer of the book of John say that whom the Son sets free is free indeed. Is there anybody who can testify? Shackles off my feet, now I can dance. You ought to give God praise for the fact that he'll deliver you when you're in some tight situations, when your hands are tied, when there's nothing else you can do to set yourself free, when they thought they had done you in and done you wrong. But here you are today on a Sunday morning with your hands lifted up, free in Jesus. Why? Because the Lord will set me free in a tight situation. What's amazing is he throws them in bound, 3 men, and then the text says he's amazed because he sees 4 men walking around loose. You missed it. He thought he was going to see 3 men laying on the ground burning, but he sees 4 men walking around in the fire loose. And he says, one of them looks like one of the gods, which means his glow was brighter than the fire he was in. Because how could you look at one and see that one was different than the other 3? Because his glory shone brighter than even the fire of the furnace. I don't know how Jesus did it. What I really think is Jesus was in the fire waiting on them before they got thrown in. Man, when Neb gonna lose his mind? Come on, Neb. I know you're gonna do it. Come on, and come on. When Neb gonna lose his mind and throw them in? Jesus in the fire, chilling, free. They get thrown in the fire, bound. By the time Neb looks in, it's not just what he sees, it's who he sees. Before they can hit the floor of the fire, Jesus says, what's up, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah? Jesus didn't call them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because your mama ain't named you that. Your mama called you Hananiah, so I'm going to call you Hananiah. Your mama called you Mishael, I'm going to call you Mishael. Your mama called you Azariah, I'm going to call you Azariah. Why? Because your name says more about your God than their gods. So let me call you the right name. Jesus is in the fire. He said, what's up, y'all? Go on and get up. Come on, walk around with me. And I think they started to do the... And Nebuchadnezzar said, I know I don't see no black folk in my fire doing the electric slide with the Son of God. Because you'll be in a tight situation and God will set you free and help you throw a party. Is there anybody who can testify? Thank you. They wanted to see you bound and burning, but now they got to watch you free and dancing. That's why you should never get mad when somebody trying to do you in, because you never know how their treatment of you might not get you closer to Jesus. And you will find yourself being thrown into a situation you was trying to avoid, get in the situation, and realize Jesus been waiting on you to get here to all to begin with. Is there anybody who can testify? I'm not scared of rock bottom because I know the rock at the bottom. I'm done. When things get hot, God will keep us cool. When things get tight, God will set us free. And when things get right, God will bless us up. You see, they couldn't predict the outcome, but it still turned out in their favor. And you will know God has delivered you when the one who cursed you and threatened you got to come back and bless you in front of everybody. Nebuchadnezzar said, y'all come out here. He only called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ain't called that fourth dude. He didn't want to see him. You stay in there. I don't want to see you. Shadrach, Meshach, y'all come here. They come out. You can't smell that they've been in a fire. Then Nebuchadnezzar says, y'all surrendered to trust your God and defied me. I ain't never seen a God who can do what your God just did. Then he made a new law with a new threat. He ain't using the fire no more. He said, if anybody talk bad about their God, I'm going to rip you apart limb from limb. He still ain't learned his lesson. He going to learn his lesson in chapter 4. In chapter 3, he did realize that there was one God who could deliver. God delivers Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and blesses them up. Everybody say up. See, the blessing was not just that they got promoted at the end. The blessing was the way they carried themselves through the fiery trial. They didn't curse this king one time. Can I? If somebody was finna throw me in a fire, I can't say what my last words might be before they throw me in. I know my first word is going to be, don't do this. I'm a man of God. Then they men wrap me up. For real, don't do this, man. I love the Lord. The closer I get to that fire, shout out, I'm from Atlanta, but don't do this to a real AT alien shouted. When I started to feel that heat, 4-letter words, not Mark, Luke, and John. But in all seriousness, God uses the fire to see who he can trust with promotion. If you're in a pressure situation, don't snap on your Nebuchadnezzar. Keep a cool attitude, because you never know how God is going to use your example to teach them the lesson they need to learn. Amen? Amen. Come on and give the Lord a hand clap of praise if you would.